The massive space station looked like a floating city made of crystal and light. Ships from hundreds of different worlds docked at its ports, each one sleeker and more beautiful than the last. The Galactic Council meeting hall buzzed with excitement. As alien beings gathered to discuss the day's business, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, the used Defiance, and stared at the station through the main screen. His ship looked nothing like the others floating nearby. Where their hulls were smooth and shining, his was patched with welded metal plates. Where theirs glowed with energy fields, his had simple lights and basic engines. "Captain, we're getting a lot of radio chatter," said Katie Brown from her communications station. She was young, maybe 25, with short brown hair and bright green eyes. "The aliens are talking about us." Jake nodded. He was 42 years old, with gray hair at his temples and lines around his eyes from years of space travel. "What are they saying?" Katie's face turned red. "Most of it isn't very nice, sir. They're calling our ship names. One species called us a flying garbage can. Another one said we look like we built our ship from spare parts." "Well, we did build it from spare parts," said Lisa Grant, Jake's first officer. She was sitting at the navigation station, her long blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun. Lisa was 38 and had been with Jake for 10 years. She knew him well enough to see the anger in his eyes, even though his voice stayed calm. "Sir, the Zelkari are broadcasting on the public channels," Katie said. "They're making jokes about humans trying to play with the big kids." Jake clenched his fists. The Zelkari were tall, thin aliens with silver skin and 4 arms. They thought they were better than everyone else because their technology was so advanced. Their ships could travel between stars in days, while it took the Defiance months to make the same trip. "The Altarians are laughing too," Katie continued. "They said our ship looks like something their children would build as a toy." The Altarians were even worse. They looked almost human, but their skin was pale blue and they had strange markings on their faces. They lived for hundreds of years, and thought younger species were like babies playing with dangerous toys. Danny Walsh looked up from his engineering station. He was a big man with thick arms and grease under his fingernails. "Captain, their ships might be pretty, but I bet they've never had to fix a broken engine with nothing but wire and hope." Jake smiled for the first time that day. Danny was right. The Defiance might look rough, but every part of it had been built by human hands. When something broke, they fixed it themselves. When they needed something new, they built it from whatever they could find. "Sir, we're getting a message from the council station," Katie said. "They want us to dock at port 712. 712? Lisa asked. "That's in the cargo section. They're treating us like a supply ship." Jake took a deep breath. He had expected this. Earth had been trying to join the Galactic Council for 5 years. Every time they sent a message, the aliens either ignored them or sent back polite letters that basically said, "Not interested." The only reason they were here now was because of the Void Maze crisis. Ships had been disappearing in that part of space for decades. The Council was desperate enough to let anyone try to solve the problem, even humans. "Take us in, Lisa," Jake said. Port 712. As the Defiance moved toward the docking port, more alien ships moved away from them. Jake could see the crews through their ship windows, pointing and laughing. Some were taking pictures like they were looking at animals in a zoo. "Captain," Katie said quietly, "the Vrex are saying we should go home before we get ourselves killed." The Vrex were the worst of all. They looked like giant insects with sharp claws and too many eyes. They thought all other species were weak and stupid. The fact that they were giving humans advice meant they thought humans were the weakest and most stupid of all. "Sir, incoming message from the Council," Katie said. "It's from Administrator Veltar." Jake knew that name. Veltar was a Kronari, one of the blue-skinned giants who ran most of the Council's daily business. He was 8 feet tall with 4 eyes and a voice like thunder. "Put him on screen," Jake said. The main screen changed to show Veltar's face. His blue skin was darker than the Altarians, and his 4 eyes looked at Jake with barely hidden disgust. "Human Captain," Veltar said, "you have been granted permission to attempt the Void Maze challenge." However, I must warn you that this is not a game. Many great ships have been lost in that region of space, ships far more advanced than yours. Jake stood up straight. We understand the risks, Administrator. Earth is ready to prove itself. Veltar's 4 eyes blinked slowly. Prove itself? Captain, your species has barely learned to travel between stars. The Void Maze has defeated ships with technology you cannot even imagine. Perhaps you should reconsider. We're not reconsidering. Jake said, we're here to do a job. Veltar was quiet for a moment. Behind him, Jake could see other aliens watching and listening. Some were shaking their heads. Others were making sounds that might have been laughter. Very well, Veltar said. Finally, dock at the assigned port. Someone will meet you there with the mission details. But Captain, do not say you were not warned. The screen went black. Jake sat back down in his captain's chair and looked around at his crew. Katie was staring at her hands. Lisa was frowning at her navigation screen. Danny was cleaning his fingernails with a small knife. Well, Jake said, at least now we know what they really think of us. Captain, Lisa said, maybe they have a point. We don't know what we're walking into. Jake shook his head. Lisa, every human who ever did something great was told it was impossible first. When people said humans couldn't fly, we built airplanes. When they said we couldn't go to the moon, we went anyway. When they said we couldn't survive in space, we built this ship. He stood up and walked to the main screen, looking out at all the alien ships surrounding them. Those aliens out there have forgotten something important. They've gotten so comfortable with their fancy technology that they've forgotten how to fight for what they want. They've forgotten how to take risks. Danny looked up from his knife. So what do we do, Captain? Jake turned back to his crew. We show them what humans can do when everyone says we can't. The Defiance moved slowly toward the docking port, surrounded by the laughter and mockery of 1,000 alien species. But inside the small, patched-up ship, 4 humans prepared to prove that sometimes the smallest dog has the biggest bite. The meeting room was huge, with walls that seemed to stretch up forever. Jake Morrison sat at a small table that felt too big for him and his crew. Around them, alien representatives filled hundreds of seats, their eyes focused on the humans. Like they were watching a show. Administrator Veltar stood at the front of the room, his blue skin gleaming under the bright lights. In his 4 hands, he held a data pad that glowed with strange symbols. The Void Maze, Veltar began, his voice echoing through the chamber, has been a problem for our galaxy for over 60 years. Ships enter the region and either disappear completely or return as empty hulks with their crews driven mad. A holographic display appeared in the center of the room, showing a section of space that looked normal from the outside. But as Jake watched, he could see the twisted paths that ships had taken before vanishing. The Thalaxians sent their best dimension-shifting scouts, Veltar continued. These ships can move between different layers of reality. All 5 ships were found floating empty, their crews babbling about colors that don't exist. The Thalaxian ambassador, a tall being made of what looked like living shadow, nodded sadly. Our pilots are still in medical care. They speak of seeing through walls and hearing the thoughts of stars. The Nexari deployed their matter phase cruisers, Veltar said. These vessels can become solid or liquid at will. 3 ships entered the maze, only 1 returned, and its crew had aged 30 years in a single day. Jake looked at his crew. Lisa was taking notes on an old paper pad. Katie was listening carefully, her face pale. Danny was studying the holographic display with the intense look he got when he was solving a difficult problem. The Zelkari Collective sent their most advanced AI-controlled ships, Veltar continued. These vessels have computer brains that can think faster than any organic mind. All 7 ships were found drifting in space, their AI systems completely wiped clean. The Salkari representative, a tall silver being with 4 arms, spoke up. Our artificial minds reported seeing impossible mathematical equations just before they shut down. The last message was, the numbers are screaming. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. If the galaxy's most advanced species couldn't solve this problem, what chance did humans have? The Chronari Empire has sent 43 ships into the Void Maze over the past 60 years, Veltar said. 17 disappeared completely. 26 returned with dead crews. We have tried everything: shielding, automation, telepathic protection, temporal manipulation. Nothing works. An insect like Vrex Queen clicked her mandibles. Perhaps the humans should hear about the Altarian attempt. Tell them about the Starweaver. Veltar's four eyes blinked slowly. The Starweaver was the most advanced ship ever built. It could bend space around itself and existed in multiple dimensions at once. The Altarians were certain it would succeed where all others had failed. The Altarian representative, a blue-skinned being with glowing marks on his face, looked down at his hands. The Starweaver entered the maze and sent back one message: the maze is not a place. It is a mind. And it is hungry. The ship was found 3 days later, Veltar said. Its crew was alive but changed. They could only speak in mathematical formulas. They saw everything as numbers and equations. They had lost the ability to understand emotions or creativity. Jake leaned forward. What do you think is causing all this? Veltar looked at him with something that might have been surprise. You ask good questions, human. We believe the Void Maze is some kind of ancient weapon or experiment. Perhaps it was created by the architects, the species that built the great ruins we find throughout the galaxy. The architects disappeared millions of years ago, the Altarian said. They left behind technology we still don't understand. If they created the Void Maze, then it may be impossible to solve. Jake stood up. Can we see the recordings from the ships that made it back? Veltar waved one of his hands, and the holographic display changed. Jake watched as ship after ship entered the maze region. At first, everything looked normal. Then the ships began to move in strange patterns, turning and spinning like they were confused. The recordings show the crews becoming disoriented within minutes, Veltar explained. They report seeing things that cannot exist, rooms bigger than their ships, corridors that lead to the outside of the vessel, gravity that flows upward. Jake studied the display carefully. What about the ship's computers? Do they record the same things? That is the strangest part, Veltar said. The ship computers show normal space. Their sensors detect nothing unusual, but the crew see and experience impossible things. Lisa raised her hand. Administrator, do we know if there's a pattern to who survives and who doesn't? Veltar consulted his datapad. Interesting question. The species with the most advanced minds tend to suffer the worst effects. The Altarians and Zelkari lose their crews completely. The Vrex and Chronari usually have some survivors, but they are changed. The simpler species, like the Gernaki traders, sometimes return with only minor mental damage. Danny spoke up for the first time. What about the ships themselves? Are they damaged? The ships show no physical damage, Veltar said. Their hulls are perfect. Their engines work normally. It's as if something affects only living minds, not mechanical systems. Jake felt a strange excitement building in his chest. There was something here, some clue that everyone was missing. Administrator, Jake said, you mentioned that the computers don't record the same things the crews see. Has anyone tried sending an unmanned ship into the maze? The room fell silent. Veltar's four eyes blinked in sequence. Of course we have tried unmanned ships. They function perfectly. They can fly through the entire maze region without any problems. But they don't encounter whatever is affecting the crews. So the phenomenon only affects living minds, Jake said. And it affects advanced minds more than simple ones. Correct, Veltar said. Which is why this challenge may be too dangerous. For your species. Humans are not as advanced as the Altarians or Zelkari, but your minds are still complex enough to be affected. Jake looked at his crew again. Lisa was frowning, deep in thought. Katie was staring at the holographic display. Danny was nodding slowly, like he was beginning to understand something. Administrator, Jake said, we need some time to study the data. Can you give us copies of all the recordings and sensor readings? Veltar made a sound that might have been laughter. Human captain, the greatest minds in the galaxy have studied this data for 60 years. What do you think you can discover in a few hours? Jake smiled. Maybe nothing. But sometimes a fresh pair of eyes can see things that others miss. Very well, Valtar said. You will have access to all our information. But remember, Captain, when your crew returns mad or dead, do not blame the Galactic Council for not warning you. As the meeting ended and the aliens began to leave, Jake heard them talking among themselves. Most were placing bets on how quickly the humans would give up. Some were wondering if they would even survive the first day. Jake didn't care what they thought. He had a feeling that the answer to the void maze was simpler than anyone realized. And if there was one thing humans were good at, it was finding simple solutions to complex problems. The challenge had been set. Now it was time to show the galaxy what humans could do. Jake Morrison sat in the Defiance's small conference room, surrounded by papers and data screens. His crew had been working for 12 hours straight, going through every piece of information the Galactic Council had given them. Empty coffee cups and food containers covered the table. Look at this, Danny Walsh said, pointing to a chart on his screen. Every time a ship disappears or comes back with a crazy crew, it happens during the same time period. Lisa Grant looked up from her own pile of papers. What do you mean? The pulsar, Danny said. There's a pulsar star near the void maze. It sends out electromagnetic pulses every few hours. Every single ship incident happens right when the pulsar fires. Katie Brown stopped reading her report. But the aliens said their sensors don't detect anything unusual in the maze. That's just it, Danny said, getting excited. Their sensors are too advanced. They filter out natural background radiation automatically. But what if that background radiation is part of the problem? Jake stood up and walked to the main screen. Show me the pulsar data. Danny's fingers flew over his keyboard. The screen filled with charts and graphs showing electromagnetic pulses from the nearby star. See this pattern? Every 2 hours and 17 minutes, the pulsar sends out a massive burst of energy. And every single time a ship has problems. In the maze, it's during one of these bursts. But that's just electromagnetic radiation, Lisa said. Ships deal with that all the time. Not like this, Danny said. This pulsar is special. It's sending out frequencies that match brainwave patterns. The aliens' fancy computers filter it out, but organic brains can't ignore it. Jake felt his pulse quicken. You're saying the pulsar is affecting the crew's minds? I'm saying it's part of the problem, Danny said. But there's more. Katie, show them what you found about the survivor reports. Katie pulled up her own data. I've been reading every single report from crews that survived the maze. The aliens all describe different things, impossible colors, rooms that change size, gravity going the wrong way. But there's a pattern. She highlighted sections of text on her screen. They all describe sensory overload. Too much information hitting their brains at once. The Altarians talked about seeing in 17 dimensions. The Zelkari said they could hear the thoughts of every star in the galaxy. It's like someone turned up the volume on everything, Lisa said slowly. Exactly, Katie said. But here's the weird part. The simpler the species, the less they're affected. The Gornaki traders barely noticed anything. But the Altarians and Zelkari, with their advanced brains, went completely crazy. Jake started pacing around the small room. So, we have a pulsar sending out brain-affecting radiation, and some kind of sensory overload that hits advanced minds harder than simple ones. There's one more thing, Danny said. I've been looking at the maze itself. It's not really a maze. It's a pattern of gravitational fields that forces ships to follow specific paths. But the pattern doesn't make sense unless you're looking at it from the fourth dimension. Fourth dimension? Lisa asked. Time, Danny said. The maze isn't just a place in space, it's a place in time. Ships entering the maze are being forced to experience multiple timelines at once. Jake stopped pacing. Multiple timelines? Think about it, Danny said. The survivors talk about seeing things that can't exist, rooms bigger than their ships, corridors that lead outside. What if they're seeing their ship from different points in time, all at once? Katie nodded. That would explain why the computer systems aren't affected. Computers can only process one timeline at a time. But organic brains might be able to perceive multiple timelines, even if they can't understand what they're seeing. So, the maze is some kind of time distortion field, Jake said. Combined with the pulsar radiation, it's overwhelming advanced minds with too much information. But why don't the aliens figure this out? Lisa asked. Danny grinned. Because they're too smart for their own good. They keep trying to solve the problem with more advanced technology. Better sensors, stronger computers, more complex shielding. But all that does is make the problem worse. Their advanced brains are picking up more information than they can handle, Katie added. The smarter they are, the more they suffer. Jake sat down heavily. So what's the solution? We go in dumb. Danny said, we strip down our systems to the basics. No advanced sensors, no AI assistance, no complex navigation. Just basic instruments and human intuition. That's crazy, Lisa said. We'd be flying blind. Not blind, Jake said, understanding dawning on his face. We'd be flying like humans. The way we learned to fly before we had all the fancy equipment. Danny nodded. The first human pilots didn't have computers telling them which way to go. They used their eyes, their hands, their gut feelings. That's what we need to do. But how do we keep our minds from being overwhelmed? Katie asked. Jake thought about the human explorers who had crossed Earth's oceans in wooden ships, who had climbed the highest mountains, who had walked on the surface of the moon. We use what makes us human. We focus on what matters and ignore what doesn't. I don't understand, Lisa said. Think about it, Jake said. When humans are in danger, what do? We don't panic. We don't get lost in complex thinking. We focus on survival. We use our training and our instincts. Military training, Katie said suddenly, stress inoculation. We train soldiers to function under extreme pressure by exposing them to more stress than they'll face in real combat. Exactly, Jake said. We've all been through survival training. We know how to function when everything is going wrong. We know how to stay calm when our senses are being overwhelmed. Danny was nodding enthusiastically. The aliens have never had to deal with real hardship. Their technology makes everything easy, but humans have been surviving in hostile environments for thousands of years. So our plan is to go into the maze with basic equipment and rely on human instincts, Lisa said. That's either brilliant or suicidal. Maybe both, Jake said. But it's the only plan that makes sense. The aliens have been trying to solve this problem by being smarter. We're going to solve it by being simpler. There's one more thing we need, Katie said. Something to keep our minds focused while we're in the maze. What do you suggest? Jake asked. Katie smiled. Music. Earth music. Something familiar to keep us grounded while everything else is going crazy. Music? Lisa said. Think about it, Katie said. When you're scared or confused, what makes you feel better? Something familiar, something that reminds you of home. The aliens don't have anything like that. They're logical beings who rely on facts and data. But humans have emotions and memories. And connections. Jake looked around at his crew. They were tired and scared, but they were also determined. They had figured out in 12 hours what the galaxy's greatest minds couldn't solve in 60 years. All right, he said. We go in simple, basic instruments, no AI, no advanced sensors. We use our training and our instincts. And we take some good, old Earth music to keep us company. The aliens are going to think we're crazy, Lisa said. Let them think that, Jake said. By the time we come back, they'll think we're something else entirely. Danny was already pulling up ship schematics. On his screen, I can have the system stripped down and ready in 6 hours. Do it, Jake said. We're going to show the galaxy that sometimes the best solution is the simplest one. As his crew got to work, Jake looked out the small window at the alien ships surrounding them. Soon, they would all learn what humans could do when everyone said it was impossible. The Defiance floated at the edge of the void maze, looking smaller than ever next to the massive alien observation ships. Jake Morrison sat in his captain's chair, watching the dozens of vessels that had come to witness what they expected to be humanity's failure. "All systems ready, Captain," Danny Walsh reported from his engineering station. His console now showed only basic readings: fuel levels, engine temperature, hull pressure. All the advanced computers had been shut down or removed. "Communications are set to manual only," Katie Brown said. She had replaced her complex radio equipment with simple, analog systems that wouldn't be affected by electromagnetic interference. "Navigation is old school," Lisa Grant added. "Star charts, compass, and dead reckoning, just like the early human explorers." Jake nodded. Through the main screen, he could see the entrance to the void maze. It looked like normal space, but he knew that was deceiving. Somewhere in that region, ships had been disappearing for 60 years. "Captain," Katie said, "we're getting messages from the alien ships. They're asking if we want to reconsider." "Tell them we're going in," Jake said. "And Katie, start the music." The sound of an old Earth song filled the bridge. It was something slow and steady, with a rhythm that reminded Jake of home. The melody was simple but beautiful, the kind of song that made you think of family and safe places. "All hands, this is the captain," Jake said into the ship's communication system. "We're about to enter the void maze. Remember your training. Stay calm, stay focused, and trust your instincts. We've got this." The Defiance moved forward, crossing the invisible boundary into the maze region. At first, nothing happened. The stars looked the same. The ship's instruments showed normal readings. Then the pulsar fired. Jake felt it immediately, a strange tingling in his brain, like someone was trying to tune a radio inside his head. The walls of the bridge seemed to shimmer, and for a moment he thought he could see through them to the engine room below. "Captain," Lisa said, her voice tight with concentration, "I'm seeing multiple navigation readings. It's like we're in 3 different places at once." "Ignore the instruments," Jake said. "Use your eyes. Look out the window and tell me what you see." Lisa turned to look through the main screen. I see stars, but they're moving in patterns, like they're dancing." "That's the time distortion," Jake said. "You're seeing the stars from different moments in time. Focus on the music. Let it anchor you." The song continued playing, its familiar melody cutting through the confusion in their minds. Jake found himself humming along, using the rhythm to keep his thoughts organized. "Captain," Danny said, "my instruments are showing impossible readings. The engine is running at 3 different temperatures simultaneously. What does your gut tell you about the engine?" Jake asked. Danny closed his eyes for a moment. "It feels fine. The vibrations are normal. The sound is right." "Then trust your gut, not the instruments." The maze began to reveal its true nature. The space around them twisted and bent, creating paths that seemed to lead in impossible directions. Jake could see corridors of distorted space-time, each one leading to a different destination. "Lisa, which way?" Jake asked. Lisa stared at the twisted paths ahead of them. Her instruments were showing dozens of different routes, but she ignored them. Instead, she watched the way the stars moved, the way the distortions flowed. "Left." She said. "No, wait, right. The path on the right feels warmer, Jake asked. "I don't know how to explain it," Lisa said. "It's like some paths feel cold and empty, but that one feels like it leads somewhere important." Jake trusted her instincts. "Take us right." As they moved deeper into the maze, the distortions became stronger. Jake could see multiple versions of his own ship, like reflections in a broken mirror. Some showed the Defiance as it was now, others showed it damaged or changed. "Katie," Jake said, "are you picking up anything on the radio?" "I'm hearing voices," Katie said. "But they're not coming from outside the ship, they're coming from inside. It's like I'm hearing conversations from different times." "Can you make out what they're saying?" Katie listened carefully. I think they're the voices of crews from the ships that disappeared. They're talking about finding something old and important." "The source?" Jake said. They found the source of the maze. The music continued to play, keeping them grounded as reality twisted around them. Jake found that as long as he focused on the song, he could think clearly. The melody was like a thread leading him through a dark forest. "Captain," Danny said, "I'm reading a massive structure ahead. It's not showing up on sensors, but I can feel it. It's like a mountain made of metal and energy." Jake looked through the main screen and saw it, a huge derelict ship, bigger than any space station. It was ancient, covered in strange symbols and glowing with an eerie light. "That's it," Jake said. "That's what's causing the maze. It's some kind of ancient vessel." As they approached the derelict ship, Jake could see that it was still active. Energy flowed through its hull like blood through veins. The ship seemed to be partially existing in multiple dimensions, flickering between different states of reality. "Captain," Lisa said, "there's a docking port. It looks like it's designed for smaller ships." "Take us in," Jake said, "but stay ready to run if things go wrong." The Defiance docked with the ancient ship, and Jake felt a strange sensation, like stepping from a moving train onto solid ground. The time distortion suddenly became clearer, more focused. The maze isn't a weapon, Jake realized. It's a test. This ancient ship is testing anyone who enters to see if they're worthy. Worthy of what? Lisa asked Dot before Jake could answer. The ancient ship's systems activated. Lights began to glow along its corridors, and a voice spoke directly into their minds. It wasn't words, but thoughts and images that told a story. The ship belonged to a species called the Architects. They had been the first to achieve faster-than-light travel, the first to map the galaxy. But they had a problem. They were alone. Every other species they found was either too primitive to communicate with or too different to understand. So they built the maze as a test. Any species that could navigate it would prove they had the right combination of intelligence and intuition, logic and creativity. They would be worthy of the Architect's greatest gift, the knowledge of how to build a truly peaceful galactic civilization. "They've been waiting," Jake said, understanding flooding through him. "For 60 years, they've been waiting for a species that could pass their test." The ancient ship's computers began downloading information into the Defiance's systems. Star charts showing hidden worlds, technology that could solve the galaxy's greatest problems, and most importantly, the wisdom of a species that had learned to live in harmony with the universe. "Captain," Katie said, "we're getting a message. From the Galactic Council, they're asking if we're still alive." Jake smiled. "Tell them we're fine. And tell them we found something incredible." As the download completed, the time distortions around them began to fade. The maze was shutting down, its purpose finally fulfilled. The ancient ship powered down its systems, its long vigil finally over. "Well," Danny said, "that was easier than I expected." "Easy?" Lisa asked. "We just navigated a 60-year-old mystery that defeated the galaxy's best minds." "Yeah," Danny said with a grin, "but we did it with basic instruments and a good song." Jake laughed. "Wait until the aliens hear about this. They're going to be very interested in human problem-solving methods." The Defiance began its journey back through the now peaceful maze, carrying with it the knowledge that would change the galaxy forever. Behind them, the ancient ship went dark, its mission complete after millions of years of waiting. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the best technology is the human heart. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so quiet. Every alien representative sat in stunned silence as Captain Jake Morrison stood at the center of the room, a data pad in his hands containing the knowledge of the Architect's administrator. Veltares' 4 eyes blinked slowly as he stared at the human captain. "You're saying that the Void Maze was not a trap, but a test." "That's correct," Jake said. "The Architects built it millions of years ago to find a species that could balance logic with intuition, technology with wisdom. They were looking for beings who could think creatively under pressure." The Zelkari ambassador stood up, his silver skin gleaming under the lights. "Impossible. Our most advanced AI systems attempted to solve the maze. They failed completely." "That's exactly why they failed," Jake said. "The test wasn't designed for artificial intelligence or pure logic. It was designed for minds that could adapt, that could trust their instincts when their instruments failed. Jake activated the datapad and a holographic display appeared showing the ancient architect ship. Gasps echoed through the chamber as the aliens saw the massive vessel for the first time. The architects were like us in many ways, Jake continued. They explored the galaxy, met other species, tried to build relationships, but they discovered something that worried them. Every advanced civilization they encountered had the same problem. What problem? Asked the Vrex Queen, her insect-like features showing genuine curiosity. They had forgotten how to take risks, Jake said. They relied so heavily on their technology that they couldn't function without it. They had become comfortable, safe, and predictable. The architects realized that such civilizations would eventually stagnate and die out. The Altarian representative shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Are you suggesting that our advancement is somehow wrong? Not wrong, Jake said, but incomplete. The architects left behind detailed records of every species they encountered. The pattern was always the same. First came discovery and exploration. Then came great technological advancement. Finally came comfort and stagnation. Jake looked around the chamber at the hundreds of alien faces staring at him. The architects created the void maze as a final test. They wanted to find a species that could advance technologically without losing their ability to think creatively, to take risks, to trust their instincts. And they believe humans possess these qualities? Veltar asked. The test results speak for themselves, Jake said. We succeeded where every other species failed. Not because we're smarter or more advanced, but because we're still willing to try impossible things. Danny Walsh, Lisa Grant, and Katie Brown sat at the small table behind Jake, watching the alien representatives process this information. Many of them looked confused, some looked angry, and a few looked fascinated. What knowledge did the architects leave behind? The Thalaxian ambassador asked. Jake smiled. Everything. Star charts showing the locations of ancient ruins and abandoned worlds. Technology that could solve problems like faster-than-light communication, unlimited clean energy, and terraforming dead planets. But most importantly, they left behind their wisdom about how to build a truly peaceful galactic civilization. And this knowledge is now in human hands, the Vrex Queen said, her voice carrying a note of concern. Yes, Jake said. But we're not planning to keep it to ourselves? The chamber erupted in surprised murmurs. Jake waited for the noise to die down before continuing. The architects made it clear that this knowledge belongs to the entire galaxy, not just to the species that passed their test. They wanted us to share it with everyone, to help all civilizations grow and improve. Why would you do this? The Zelkari ambassador asked. You could use this knowledge to make humanity the most powerful species in the galaxy. Jake thought about his answer carefully. Because that's not what we want. Humans don't want to rule over other species. We want to explore, to learn, to build something better together. Furthermore, Jake continued, the architect's records show that species learn best when they work together. The knowledge is designed to be shared, not hoarded. It only reaches its full potential when different species contribute their unique perspectives. Veltar stood up slowly. Captain Morrison, you are saying that humanity wishes to share this incredible gift with the entire Galactic Council. That's exactly what I'm saying, Jake said. But there's a condition. The chamber fell. Silent again. Jake could feel the tension in the air as hundreds of aliens waited to hear what humanity would demand in return for such valuable knowledge. The condition is simple, Jake said. We all have to remember what the architects learned. Technology is wonderful, but it's not everything. We need to keep taking risks, keep exploring, keep trying new things. We need to stay curious. That's it. The Altarian representative asked. You don't want territory or resources or special privileges? We want to be part of something bigger than ourselves, Jake said. We want to help build a galaxy where every species can grow and learn and explore. A galaxy where no one gets left behind. The Vrex Queen clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. The humans continue to surprise us. Most species would use such knowledge to gain power over others. Maybe that's why we passed the test, Jake said. The architects weren't just looking for problem-solving skills. They were looking for species that would use their gifts to help others. Veltar walked down from his platform and stood directly in front of Jake. For a moment, the massive blue alien and the human captain simply looked at each other. "Captain Morrison," Veltar said, "I owe you an apology. When your ship first arrived, I saw only a primitive vessel crewed by an unknown species. I failed to see the potential that lay beneath the surface." "You weren't the only one," Jake said, with a smile. "Half the galaxy was taking bets on how quickly we'd fail, and now?" Veltar asked. Jake looked around the chamber at all the alien faces watching him. Some still looked skeptical, but many now showed respect and genuine interest. "Now, we have work to do," Jake said. "The architects left us enough knowledge to keep the galaxy busy for the next 1,000 years. But it's going to take all of us working together to make the most of it." The Zelkari ambassador stepped forward. "Captain, on behalf of the Zelkari Collective, I formally apologize for our earlier mockery. We would be honored to learn from humanity's example." One by one, other representatives stood up and offered similar apologies and requests for cooperation. The Altarians wanted to study human decision-making techniques. The Vrex wished to learn about human risk-taking behavior. The Thalexians were interested in human creativity and intuition. "There's something else," Jake said as the chamber began to quiet down. The architects left a message specifically for the species that passed their test. They said that the real test wasn't navigating the maze. The real test was what we would do with the knowledge afterward. "And what did they expect?" Veltar asked. Jake smiled. "They expected us to use it to help others, to build something better than any single species could create alone. They expected us to prove that intelligence and wisdom can grow stronger when they're shared." As the formal session ended and the alien representatives began to file out, many stopped to speak with Jake and his crew. The conversations were different now, respectful, curious, collaborative. "Captain," Lisa said quietly, "I think we just changed the galaxy." "We all did," Jake said, watching as aliens who had been enemies for centuries began talking to each other about shared projects and mutual cooperation. Danny looked out through the great windows of the station at the stars beyond. "So what happens now?" "Now we get to work," Jake said. "We've got a galaxy to explore, problems to solve, and new friends to make." Katie smiled. "And we get to do it all together." As the Defiance prepared to leave the station, Jake took one last look at the massive facility. When they had arrived, it had been a place where Earth was barely tolerated. Now it was the beginning of something unprecedented, a truly united galactic civilization built on cooperation and mutual respect. The galaxy had mocked Earth's lone ship when it arrived. Now they were asking humanity to help them build the future. It was, Jake thought, a pretty good day's work.